we're back on JB and Co. This time with a dear friend of mine who I've known since elementary school, Genevieve Gomez-Long.
Hi, guys.
Genevieve is currently an emergency room nurse at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago. Her education includes a bachelor's degree in human physiology from the University of Iowa and a nursing degree from Olivet Nazarene University. Thanks for spending time with us today, Genevieve.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I'm so excited.
Perfect. Now, as I said, Genevieve, I've known you for a long time, dear friend of mine. And ever since I've known you, you've always been sincere and caring. So it makes perfect sense why you got into the line of work that you did and being a healthcare worker. But can you kind of give us some background on maybe the experiences that you went through or the reasoning why you chose to pursue this career?
Sure. First of all, thanks for the kind words. Anyone who knows me back in high school and beyond that, I've always kind of been a little lost. I didn't really know what way was up. I always knew I had a passion for caring for people, which is kind of a cliche answer. You ask any nurse, why'd you get into nursing? And it's, I wanted to care for people, but it's true. In college, I struggled finding my path in terms of how I wanted to help people. So, I bounced from wanting to be a therapist, a physical therapist, I went through all the motions. And then, once I found nursing, it made so much sense because kind of a jack of all trades. I get to treat the mind, the body. I see people in their worst place and provide them with not only physical healing, but being able to, bring compassion to the table as well. And I think that's totally what drove me to get through the strenuous schooling it takes. And, the training on site too, being at Northwestern, they do not play around. So, but it's one of those things where I wake up in the morning and I'm not dreading to go to work, which is amazing, amazing feeling. And even after my worst day, I still, get up and do it again. So,
yeah. Well, you touched on an important topic that I want to address. A lot of the people that I've interviewed during season 2 are people who are highly respected in the business world. People that maybe didn't know what they wanted to do at the beginning of their career, but obviously they ended up finding themselves and they ended up going on and doing great things. You just said that in college, you didn't know exactly what you wanted to do. You knew you wanted to be in this line of work, but it took you some time to find that. Can you kind of talk about how you went about searching for what you truly wanted to do? Because I feel like there are a lot of people that are just like you that are in college right now that want to be in the same line of work, but may be down or lost because they don't know exactly what they want to do. What advice would you give them?
Absolutely. The advice that I wish I had in that position is don't doubt yourself. I think the biggest thing that I did was say, oh, these classes are going to be too hard for me. I'm not smart enough. I'm not this, I'm not that. But if it's something you're truly passionate about, you make it work. And you'll be surprised how smart you can be when it's something that you're interested in. School wasn't my favorite thing always until I got into this track. And then it just clicked. It made so much sense. So I think just taking the time to realize that you're capable, not limiting yourself. I ran into plenty of guidance counselors through school that weren't that supportive. And so just finding the strength within yourself to accomplish these things and realize that, if no one found that strength, no one would fulfill these jobs and no one would be doing the good work. So I think it took me a long time to get to that point. And, obviously there's still days with self-doubt, but just knowing that, if it's something you're truly passionate about, you always find a way. And, I hit 1,000,001 roadblocks, whether it was, being able to find tuition money or not having enough hours in the day to study for a test. But, somehow it always works out when it's something you really want, as long as you're willing to put in the work.
I think you said it best. You set a great example yourself. So I appreciate you sharing that info. I think the same thing I think of the same thing when I play basketball. It's like, if you want it enough, you'll do the things that you have to do to get it done. And obviously everybody's path is going to have some ups and downs in it, but as long as you stay true to yourself and stay true to the process, you'll obviously end up where you want to be.
Totally. And growth is never linear. I mean, to assume that it's going to be this straight journey upwards, I mean,
they're telling you a lie. They're telling you a lie.
Yeah, exactly. And, don't get your hopes up, because it doesn't work that way. And if you give up after the first knockdown, I mean, you're not going to get there. So yeah, I 100% agree.
Exactly. I love that. Now, Genevieve, throughout this pandemic, we've all had to adjust to new normals. Obviously, everybody knows that, but healthcare workers especially have had to adjust to new normals. And I know that I was recently reading an article from a nurse who works at John Stroger Hospital in Chicago. And this nurse said, quote, "With COVID, there is no such thing as a typical day, as one day runs into another." So I want to ask you, whether it be the overflowing of patients or the longer hours, how has a typical day changed for you pre-COVID versus post-COVID?
Yeah. So this is very on brand of my whole life, but my career actually started in the midst of COVID. So I've been trained like around COVID in terms of my actual job. But to compare it to, I had, several month-long clinical rotations. So to compare it to that, because that was pre-pandemic, we didn't wear masks. I mean, which seems so silly, but now I look at it, I'm like, ew, I'd walk into a patient room, they'd be so sick, and I would just be bare face, which seems like insane to me now. And I always compare it to, now I was just telling this story to someone the other day. A coworker of mine was saying their mom was a nurse a long time ago, pre-AIDS pandemic, and they didn't used to wear gloves. So now I'm thinking, like, 50 years from now, nurses are going to look back and see that we didn't used to just wear masks when patients were sick, and think, wow, that's crazy. So I would say that's the biggest thing in comparison to that. But what I've noticed is just the acuity of patients, which means how sick the patients are at each day. So, in morning huddle, we call it, where, the start of shift, we all meet and the charge nurse comes. They'll talk about, what level of acuity we are that day, which means, we could have 4 or 5 intubated COVID patients, while a stroke patient or a heart attack patient all at the same time. Which, of course, in the emergency room, you always see really sick people. But I think the difference now is you're having your normal heart attacks, strokes, things like that coming in, while also having these respiratory failure patients. And just being able to divide the resources has been really hard. I could have an assignment of only 2 rooms, but those 2 rooms could be a stroke patient and an intubated patient. And, it's a struggle knowing how to balance the work and emotionally being able to expend that much energy.
I think you brought up a great point right there. Obviously, you have to see a lot every day as an emergency room nurse. I know just yesterday, I saw a reporter, and I can't remember for what network, but a reporter was, she started crying and she started breaking down during her interview because she was just so sad after visiting all these hospitals throughout this pandemic. She, time and time again, she continues to see people dying, people not being able to meet with their families who are in the hospital. So she just was crying because of the time that we're going through, and stressing that we all have to do better in order to fix this problem. For you, like you just said, you see this every single day. What kind of toll does it take on you personally?
It's funny, since it's all I've known in my career, and only being able to compare it to my clinical rotations, it almost feels normal, which is a really sad thing to say. It takes a toll. I mean, you come home and, feeling gross, you have to go take a shower right away. But I could literally fall asleep instantly, not only from physical exhaustion, but emotional exhaustion. I just think even if you didn't have the heaviest workload of patients, you're still in the environment helping out your colleagues with really sick patients who, a patient who was completely awake, but their status was declining. And so we had to tell them we're going to intubate them and they have to say goodbye to their family. It's just nothing that anyone should ever have to experience. Or, since the hospitals are so overrun, patients come into the emergency room, and typically before the pandemic, our job is to stabilize these sick patients and then send them to the areas that, for further care. But now we're seeing patients coming into the ER, we stabilize them, and then we have to continue that care that they normally would receive, like in the ICU or whatever floor it might be. And I think that's been kind of a hard adjustment for me too, is just, not getting to only feel the victory of stabilizing someone, but then also having to deal with the realities of their constant fluctuations in status.
For sure. And I'm glad you touched on the fact that every time you come home from the hospital, you feel like the need to take a shower, because obviously that's because of everything that you're around throughout the day. So what I wanted to ask you is that obviously healthcare workers being our rock, being our backbone, being the foundation while we're trying to fight this pandemic, what preventative measures do you have to take when coming home from the hospital to be with your friends, family, and loved ones, other than taking a shower?
Instantly. If I could remove my skin and throw it in the washing machine, I would, but that's not possible. So the hard part about the ER is obviously people coming in, you don't know if they're COVID positive or not. I mean, we've come far enough now that it's pretty easy to point out someone who's looking COVID-y, we call it, not most proper, but then there's also cases where someone's coming in for abdominal pain and then we swab them for COVID and they're positive, and you've been in their room this whole time. While there's universal precautions, which is a surgical mask and goggles, typically with the COVID patients, we wear these heavy duty respirators where we look insane. So it's kind of scary sometimes when they're like, oh, by the way, the patient you've been in the room with 17 times now actually is COVID positive. So that's been pretty scary. I try personally to be as careful as possible. I assume everyone who comes through my patient rooms are positive, just because, I'm less worried about myself and I'm more worried about spreading it to others. That would really, kill me to know that I am giving it to someone else. And I really don't see my family that often. When I do, prior to working, I would, do the 2-week quarantine. And now I really try not to see them, at least until, they can get their vaccine, because my dad's 65 and has a heart condition. My mom is getting up there in age too. So I won't say it because she'll kill me, but
we won't show her this interview.
Yeah, she'll be so mad. So just trying to keep my space as much as possible, which really stinks. Obviously, family time is important, and that's something that I think we've all come to realize this year, especially. So I'm just ready for it to be over.
Yeah, for sure. And if we could just talk on that just a little bit more, because I think that's something that people need to understand, is that healthcare workers are protecting their friends and loved ones by not seeing them as much as they usually do. Now, obviously, you'll have the occasions where you do get to see friends and family, but it's just never as often as it used to be. So like you just said, you went from trying to see your parents doing a 2-week quarantine, and so that way you could see them, to basically trying not to see them at all in order to protect them. Is this something that you see throughout the whole industry with healthcare workers and all their families, or maybe friends that you have that are also healthcare workers? Are they trying to stay away from their families as much as possible?
Yeah, especially, I don't have as many friends in other departments, but especially in the ED where, we see it day in, day out, and obviously our risk of exposure is so high. I would say 95% of my coworkers and I are on the same page in terms of our safety precautions. which can be frustrating because then you see the people who aren't taking this seriously. And it's like,
Mhm.
well, not only do I have to sacrifice myself, going into work and caring for these patients, which I know is my job and I love to do it, but, I also don't get to see my family now. So it's taken a toll on, I think, a lot of people, realizing that we're kind of like the sacrificial group of people.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, like I said, we love to care for people. This is our job. But I think that plays a huge role in, the emotional toll this has taken on healthcare workers.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, it's taking a toll on you. It's taking a toll on all of us, but healthcare workers especially. I wanted to ask, are there any activities that you found yourself acquiring throughout this pandemic that maybe you didn't do before the pandemic that helps ease the pain or helps ease the stress or take the pressure away from you so that way you can relax in a sense whenever you do get a day off?
Yeah, absolutely. I've picked up reading again. I used to love leisure reading prior to college when all my reading consisted of reading chemistry textbooks and nothing fun, which, and especially with the extra spare time we have, there's only so much TV you can watch. So I've really tried to pick up reading, finding alternative ways to stay active, just because I'm not comfortable going to the gym yet. Has been a challenge, but also fun.
I have to add in, I'll let you finish. I love the fact that you've gotten the weights. I've seen that you've been ordering the weights and you've been doing your thing at home. So that's been really cool to see.
Yeah. That was an investment that I had to make because it was getting to the point where you can only do so many sit-ups and jumping jacks in your family room. And so, sometimes there's days I lack that motivation to do those things, but at the same time, it's like when I'm not at work, I have all day to fill. So I'd say, trying to stay active, walking my dog, exercising, reading, trying to avoid doom scrolling on social media as much as possible, just because I get stuck in a black hole real quick.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I hope that things get back to normal. So that way I can see you replicate the workout that I did maybe 2 summers ago it was, where I was doing the feet thing. And I know that you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, that's my favorite video all time, those quick feet.
So hopefully when everything gets back to normal, me and you can get in the gym together and try those quick feet out.
Yeah. Do you have any tips on how I can move my feet any quicker? Because
Oh yeah, don't worry, I got you.
Perfect. I can't wait.
Now, Genevieve, this is a personal question, but I think it's an important question because it kind of displays the love and tenderness that comes with being a healthcare worker. I wanted to know if you can share a heartfelt story or an experience that you endured during this pandemic that maybe my audience and I might find heartwarming or interesting.
Okay, yeah. Obviously there's the sad heartfelt stories. And I touched on that, having to intubate the woman who then called her family and was saying, goodbyes because she wasn't sure what was the next turn. But more important than that is actually just the response that I get from a lot of my patients. They're coming to us in the worst condition possible. They're in a very scary place. They're not feeling well. They're scared. They're this. But the one thing I've noticed is many of them take time to ask us how we're doing, which I think is incredible. I think, it's a response to our good care that they're wanting to, make sure that we're feeling okay as well. And that's one thing that I think, while COVID has definitely divided a lot of people in opinions, the people that it does affect and the people we are caring for are grateful for that. And, they're willing to take time out of their scary moment to see, hey, nurse, how are you doing through all of this? And I think that's been the biggest thing for me, is just being like, wow, this person's in here with a possible heart attack and they're taking the time to say, I hope you got rest last night, or I hope your family's safe, or did you get the vaccine? Those have been kind of touching moments for me. I know it's not some big, amazing story, but it's felt really, heartfelt for me through the whole process.
Yeah. Now, I think that's a great story because I think it really puts things into perspective. The people who are actually in the hospital are the ones who are worried about, the nurses or maybe
Mm-hmm.
people that aren't in the hospital. And I think that speaks volumes because it shows us, wow, like if that person is in the hospital and they're fighting COVID-19 or whatever they may be fighting, and they have enough energy to care about somebody else, then
Absolutely.
maybe that should show like how we should be as humans and the human kindness that we should give out every day. And we should take every day as a blessing. We should be humble that we're healthy. We should be humble, that we're able to be with our families. And we should figure out ways to give that back to somebody else because of what you just
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, the biggest thing I've learned is compassion results in compassion. Being kind to someone 9 times out of 10, they're going to be kind back to you. And that's what I've seen. I mean, obviously there's the occasional pain in the butt person that comes through who is not very nice. But that doesn't ruin my day when, my 4 other patients are sweet as pie. So it's great.
I mean, just from you talking right there, you make me want to join the healthcare industry, and I'm sure you're gonna persuade a lot of others, whoever watches this video.
It's never too late. I will say that.
I love that. It's never too late, and hopefully, whoever is watching this that wants to be a healthcare worker one day, they understand, the gift that comes with being a healthcare worker. You being able to care for somebody, treat somebody, and love somebody that you don't know, and then being able to reciprocate that energy right back to you.
Absolutely. It makes it all worth it.
Perfect. Now, Genevieve, obviously, with being a healthcare worker, there's a lot that comes along with it. And especially during this time in the pandemic, everybody's had to play their role. And I kind of relate it back to basketball. It's like the perfect basketball play doesn't happen unless everybody does their job right. The big man has to sprint the floor. The point guard has to know how to dribble the ball and see what's going on. The shooting guard has to know how to shoot the basketball, obviously. So everything it works in motion, and it's kind of like poetry. And I think it's the same thing with the healthcare industry. So with everything going on with this pandemic, I wanted to ask you, for everybody that has played the role in the pandemic, has your appreciation grown for your colleagues, such as not just the nurses, but also the doctors, the professors, the researchers, and the scientists who have all made a lasting imprint on trying to help the time that we're going through today?
Absolutely. I think it's been really miraculous watching the scientific method unfold, because that's basically what's happening. We were confronted with something we've never seen before, and scientists and healthcare workers had to think on their feet on, what's next. And so, researchers, doctors, nurses, everyone has, definitely played their part in trying to discover, what this is, how to treat it, what's the best practice here. And I think that's been really, while this whole thing has been tragic, it's been really wonderful to see the power of science. And, obviously the teamwork it takes to accomplish those things is inspiring as well. Just like you said, comparing it to basketball, nothing gets done if everyone doesn't play their part. And that's exactly what's happened here and is continuing to happen. And, being at Northwestern, it's it's a little daunting. I'm surrounded by these like incredibly intelligent doctors, nurses, everyone who works there. I'm just like, I don't want to speak because I might say the wrong thing. It's unbelievable. So while my appreciation for my fellow colleagues, no matter what part of healthcare they played a role in, has always been there, it's definitely grown, at Northwestern and beyond everywhere. And I'm excited to see what more we discover. And hopefully one day we'll reach the point where we know as much about, the flu as we do, or know as much about COVID as we do about the flu.
Exactly.
Because, it's got to start somewhere.
And like you said, we didn't foresee this happening. And I think that's a main reason why you're appreciative, and I'm appreciative, because everybody plays a role. And, you know, this is not going to be an easy thing to fix because it's never happened before. It's unprecedented. So just like the flu, we have to do our due diligence and figure out how to attack COVID-19. So that way, moving forward, we don't have this issue. But I think with any problem in life, you always have to look at the advantages. It's easy to look at the disadvantages and to say, oh, this is what's wrong. But to be able to look at a problem and see the light at the end of the tunnel, such as, you know, we're taking science to a whole new level. Doctors, nursing as a whole are becoming educated on something a lot more than what they were before. So this experience is new, but because of it, we're learning a lot more out of it.
Absolutely. It's basically making history.
Exactly. We're a part of history. That's what I like to say. I was talking to my friend about it on the way here, and we were kind of just like talking, you know, about these last 9 months and how they've been so crazy. And we were just kind of like, you know, this is all history. It's like, right now it doesn't seem like it, but you know, when our kids go to school, when our kids go to school, they're going to be reading about pretty much everything that happened throughout 2020 and obviously some things that are happening throughout 2021. And they're going to be like, this never happened. Yeah, they're gonna be like,
this is a lie.
And we're gonna be the old ones like, no, I swear this really did happen.
I know I saw memes about, you know, like, oh, kids are going to be pulling all-nighters studying for their 2020, 2021 test. And I'm like, absolutely. There's so much content. Yeah, I'm kind of tired living through historical events. I think I've hit my allotted amount.
Exactly.
But no.
Like you said, there's so much historical content. And I think that, you know, leads me right into my next question that I want to touch on is the fact that obviously we faced troubling times with this ongoing pandemic, but we've also faced troubling times with Black and Brown Americans in this country. We've seen problems from the beginning of this pandemic when we saw protests and riots happening. You know, I think the racism that still exists in our country and also the police brutality that exists was something that was clearly evident more than ever. And I think that was a big problem that we went through in 2020 and something that we are still fighting till this day. Obviously, it's something that's gone on for the last 400 years, but it's something that's been evident, especially during this time where we were all locked in the house and we all had the opportunity to see it. And the reason why I bring this up is because I just want to say thank you for being an ally, for somebody who speaks up on this. I know me being African-American myself, it's like we get to the point where, you know, we don't necessarily feel like the need to have to always speak up all the time or always have to educate somebody. So to see a friend of mine and also a friend of mine who is Caucasian descent, it meant a lot to me to see you speak up on my behalf and Black and Brown Americans as a whole. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I wanted to ask you, what was it that made this important to you, and why is it that this is still important to you till this day?
Sure. Excellent question.